The Create a Personal Budget assignment in Lesson 4 is a little challenging. After all, it is in the Mastery Assessment portion of Lesson 4 for the Microsoft Official Academic Course for Excel. So let me take a moment to go through the steps and show you how I would do this in Excel. I'll create another video for accomplishing the same tasks in Google Drive. Our first step is to open the file 04 Personal Budget Start. We'll want to enable editing. And I realize this next step is technically the last step where they tell us to save the file, but I am always a big fan of saving my file when I start, and that way, if I lose power, Microsoft will automatically save any autosaves to the new file name, and it makes it really easy for me to just hit the save button as I go along. So, File, Save As. I'm going to go in our Lessons for Student folders, and we are going to call this 04 Personal Budget Solution. So we have our original file, and now our working and final file. Excellent. So the next thing is to make sure that we have the expense sheet, which is our only sheet right now. And we're going to name cell B7 Income Total. Earlier in this lesson, we learned about absolute cell references. Of course, using a name is probably the ultimate in absolute cell references. Our next step is to name cells B10 through B14 Home Total. We also want to create similar named ranges for the Daily Living Total Of course, I'd like to see a little more of this. So I'm going to grab that slider there and move that over so I can see my names completely. Transportation total. And entertainment total categories. Alright, so that completes step number 4. Step number 5. Create a formula in cell D4 that subtracts the actual amount from the budgeted amount. We'll scroll up here. Could probably actually get a little more room in our sheet by minimizing the ribbon. So our actual amount is going to be subtracted from the budget. So if you're not very good with word problems, you could do this in the order that the word problem says, which says subtract the actual amount. So we'll do an equal sign, because all formulas and functions begin with an equal sign. And then we'll hit the minus sign for subtract. And then we'll select the actual amount from the budgeted amount, which is a positive value. So that might be a confusing formula for you. That would work. Our instructions let us know that the cells in column D are already formatted to display a dash if the budgeted amount and the actual amount are the same, or frankly, if the difference is 0. Then we're supposed to copy the formula down. I don't really like the order of that formula, so I'm going to go ahead and change it to something that makes a little more visual sense to me. I'm going to select my budget, and I'm going to subtract the actual amount from it, which in a word story would be take from your budget the actual amount spent. So we still get that same result, which is 0. And they want us to go ahead and copy that on down through D6, and I'm just using my autofill handle. If you haven't got used to this in Excel, take a moment to look at cursors. When we're generally selecting, we have this very large white plus. When we want to move something in Excel, if we hover over one of the edges of this cell, we get these crosshairs, which would allow us to move the cell, which is like a cut and paste, but we don't want to do that either. And when we autofill, we hover over that black box in the bottom right corner, we get that black plus sign. That is the autofill handle, and that allows us to copy cells in a particular direction, down, up, or side to side. We're now supposed to create a formula for D7 that subtracts the actual amount from the budgeted amount using the income total range name. So we'll start our formula with an equal sign, and I'm actually going to start typing income total. Notice that it comes up in the prompt that Excel has remembered my named ranges, and so I'm going to double click on that to select that value, and we can see that it turns blue, and the blue highlight indicates that item in the budget sign. Subtract the actual from it there. Now, beginning with the home section, we're going to create a formula in the non-total cells in column D. So what they're saying is we're going to avoid these total cells, and we're just going to do in the line item, write a formula to subtract the actual amount from the budgeted amount using the range name for the budgeted amount. So here in D10, we're going to do equals, and then we're going to start typing home total, and we'll get a little hint for that. We'll subtract minus, and then we'll hit C10. Now, this might seem kind of odd to you. Why am I selecting a range of cells to subtract from? But Excel understands that when I am subtracting C10 from the range of home total, it can only subtract from one. And what might help make sense of this is that by naming the range of cells home total, we haven't automatically added those cells up. They are still individual cells that we act on individually. And because this is a spreadsheet and using that named range, we are able to subtract line for line with the neighboring items in the same row from a column that is named. So this works. We are subtracting 950 from 950, not every item in the home total range. Go ahead and use the autofill. So use the autofill handle and scroll down to here. Now sometimes when I have to do similar calculations all the way down, if I had just done a formula to subtract C10 from B10, I'd consider copying that all the way down and just deleting these totals and reformatting these cells. That's actually a lot of work. And I can't do that because when we get down here, we've used a named range in our calculation. So why would we use a named range? One thing we might do is if we add a line item here, it should add to our named range. We can continue to get correct totals in the difference column. Step 8, we're going to begin with the home section. We're going to create a formula in the total cells in column D that subtracts the actual amount from the budgeted amount. In this case, we're going to use the cell address for the budgeted amount. And we can just use our copy and paste functions to copy these all the way down. I'm using Control-C and Control-V on my keyboard to do that. Now, sometimes, especially when you've done a copy and paste, you get this dotted line ring around a cell. I tend to call that dancing ants. And you can get rid of the dancing ants by pressing the escape key. In cells E10 through E14, we're supposed to create a formula that divides the budgeted amount by the income total. We're going to start to type our home total divided by the income total. We'll copy that on down for those cells. We can see how much these items were a percent of the total income. Step 10 asks us to use cell E15 to create a formula that divides the budgeted amount by the income total, and we're going to use the cell reference for the total this time, and divide that by the named reference income total. Highlight the cells in our formula, and that's what we want to be doing, so we hit enter. And that's completed. Step 11 asks us to repeat that for each of these other three sections. Now, when I'm doing this, I'm just starting to type the first couple letters, and they're easy for me to remember because, of course, they're the headings here in the table. The table's well designed, with good markings that help me remember what I'm doing not only now, but 2 years from now when I come to look back at this again. I could be using tools in the formula bar to use names in a formula, but I tend to try to use my keyboard as much as possible, just because it's that much faster for me. This final step is a step that seems to trip up a lot of people, and it is step number 12. The figure that displays in cell B36 is based on a named range, but part of the range is incorrect. Use the Name Manager or Show Formulas command to analyze the formula for the expenses range and correct it. Alright, so while the step says that we can use the Show Formulas command to help us analyze this, it only shows us part of our problem, and it doesn't actually show us why we are not getting a correct calculation. It shows us that the named range expenses is referencing the home living total, which is what we want it to. The line item gas under transportation, which we don't want, but we do want this daily living total, and the entertainment total. We don't have a way of fixing it here using the show formulas. So to use show formulas is just an extra step, and it might help us visualize in ways that using the name manager might not help. One of the things the show formulas tool lets us see very quickly is we've grabbed a line item instead of the daily living total. But what it doesn't show us is what's making this error, because grabbing the wrong line wouldn't give us this reference error. What we need to do is we need to go into the name manager and look at what expenses refers to. And we can see here that it refers to, on the expenses sheet, cell B15, which is good, cell B23, which we don't want. We wanted B21. So we can manually go in there and change that one. It shows B28, that's great, and B33, that's great, and then at the end it has this plus ref. So it has some references to cells that don't exist. And this might happen to us in the course of working with a spreadsheet. If we had this cell refer to cells that we have since deleted, or maybe had on another worksheet. So what we want to do is we want to get rid of this here. Now this is the part that we did not see in the Show Formulas tool. But this name manager doesn't help us visually see the blue outlines around the cells that we want. So we're going to get rid of that ref. I'm going to select close. And it asks us if we want to save the changes that we made. We'll say yes. And by simply referencing the expenses named range, it's adding up those values for us without even using the sum command, because we have more than one cell in there. If we wanted to do something other than add them up, we'd have to use a function, which we'll learn about next week. The final step is to save the workbook in our Lesson 4 folder as Personal Budget Solution, and upload the file to Moodle. So I'll hit save, which is going to go ahead and save it to Personal Budget Solution, which I named it at the very beginning. And then I'll go ahead and upload it to Moodle. And I'm sure you all know how to do that by now.